hockey fans? Today we're interviewing a very special guest, a hockey journalist from the Seattle Times, Geoff Baker. Let's go! There he is.
Hey,
Hi, how are you doing?
how are you?
I'm doing very well. So I just want to ask, like right now, how's the weather right there in there?
Weather in here is overcast because it's Seattle, and we have a lot of overcast weather this time of year. Usually right around July 1st, July 4th, it gets really, really sunny, and it stays sunny for several months in Seattle. But yeah, it does rain. It does rain. It doesn't pour rain like it shows in the movies here, but it's really, really overcast. The good thing is, like, unlike living in Montreal or someplace like that, it doesn't get to be 30 below with ankle deep snow in the winter time. So that makes it nice. It's I've been out here now for 15 years in Seattle, so I'm sort of starting to call it home. It's hard. I lived almost 30 years in Montreal, so that's always going to be home to me. But it's starting to feel a little differently here now.
So speaking of Montreal, like you grew up in Montreal. You were obviously a Habs fan. What was it like covering a new team in an amazing, city like Seattle? But how hard was the switch from Montreal to Seattle?
Well, it's not that hard at all. As you can see from behind me, I grew up a Canadiens fan. There's the Guy Lafleur autographed sweater on the back. It hasn't been that hard yet. Look, I mean, the thing is, there's a difference between covering sports professionally as a journalist versus covering them or just being a fan from a distance. Like, I'll give you an example. Back in 1996, I actually covered the Montreal Alouettes for the Gazette the very first year that they were back in town. They moved back from Baltimore back then, 25 years ago. And I was a huge CFL fan at the time. But I gotta say, covering the team up close, that there's an expression in the business, you get to see how the sausage is made. And if you go to a restaurant or something, you don't necessarily want to see how the sausage is actually made before you eat it. But I got to see how it was made. And I met a lot of nice people there at the time, but it was very tough to root for the team while you're actually working there and covering them every day. It just gets to be very different. You get to see all the behind the scenes stuff. It's very hard to become a fan and stay a fan when that happens. So since I stopped covering the team, I covered them for that 1 year. I became an Alouettes fan again after that. I went to see them in several Grey Cups, cheered for them. It's just very different when you have that psychological distance from a team. So I think it's going to be a little like that now. I'll probably root for Montreal in the back of my mind. And if they win a Stanley Cup, of course, I'll be very happy for them. But professionally, this is my job. It's not really my job to cheer for them anymore. And funny story, the last time they won the Cup in 1993, I was living 3 blocks away from the Forum in Montreal, and I was covering crime for the Gazette at the time. I was a crime reporter. And so they had me on riot duty on standby for when they won the Cup, because it was obvious they were going to win. So I watched the first 2 periods in my apartment, and then downtown at Guyane de Maisonneuve. And then walked over to the Forum and was there right when the riot started and covered it. And if you go look, there's a T-shirt that they made of that with Patrick Roy holding up the Stanley Cup, and it says "Cup comes home." And the Gazette made a T-shirt out of that. And if you look in the top left-hand corner, you'll see my byline from the riot of when I wrote the story about the riot.
So what is the atmosphere like in the city right now?
It's well, for me personally, if you're asking that, it's a dream come true. I mean, I've told this story to a few people in Montreal. Before I covered the Alouettes, I was working in news at the Gazette, and I was approached by the management of the paper about switching into sports, because the idea was I was going to cover the Canadiens. I would do a year or 2 of football max just to get me into the writing, and then I was going to cover the Canadiens as the beat writer. And Red Fisher, who was obviously the legendary beat writer and columnist at the Gazette, was going to become a full-time hockey columnist so that he could focus on what he did best, which was really, writing really, really good thought-provoking pieces. And so that was the idea. Then we had a management change at the time, and they wanted to keep Red exactly where he was. And so That plan got called off after a year. And I ended up moving on to Toronto to cover baseball. So 25 years later, this is my chance now to cover the NHL that I thought I was going to get 25 years ago. So it's a great opportunity. As far as fans go here in Seattle, there's a lot of excitement about it. We've been missing winter sports here for a long time, professional winter sports. Ever since the Supersonics left the NBA team in 2008, they went to Oklahoma City. And there's really a void here. So like the Mariners baseball team, they haven't been very good lately. And so their season's usually done by summertime. It's pretty much done right now. And we're only in the month of June. So really between then and the fall, you have nothing really holding interest except for a soccer team, which is good. You have the Sounders, a very good soccer team. But honestly, after the fall season, after football season here, when you get into the winter months in January, it's dead for several months and until you get anything competitive in this city. So they really do need this hockey team. I think fans are looking forward to it. I think a lot of them are curious about what hockey is going to be like. And then you also have longtime hockey fans that have moved here from all over the country to join the technology industry, and they bring their old allegiances with them. So you have Blackhawk fans, Penguin fans, you have Calgary Flames fans, you have people anywhere there's a tech industry in this country, technology, San Jose Sharks fans, they come up here. So there's a really good mix between that and the newcomers to the sport.
Nice. So Seattle is home to many major sports and sport teams. So it makes sense to have a hockey team. Do you think the Kraken will pick up some of the Sonics fan base?
I think there will be a curiosity factor from some of the Sonics fans. Yes, there's some of the people that have lived in Seattle a long time. There are quite a few actual hockey fans here because they had a minor professional hockey before, the old, not the American Hockey League, but very similar. The Western Hockey League was about the same back in the 60s and 50s. And the Seattle Totems were a really good team at the time. So you still have some old-time hockey fans here. We've had a lot of junior teams locally, in the state, and also two of them here in the region, the Seattle Thunderbirds and the Everett Silvertips. So there is a hockey base here. And I think a lot of the newcomers I mentioned are going to come from the Sonics fans who are a little curious about the arena and what it's going to look like, because they spent $1 billion renovating the arena here. And the idea is it's not only going to be for NHL, it's going to be to get an NBA team back here as well. So there's a lot of interest in this hockey team doing well from basketball fans because they hope they get a return of the Sonics, some version of the Sonics.
Can you tell me about the team's name and its significance? And has the city embraced the name, like the Seattle Kraken?
There's absolutely no significance whatsoever with the Kraken, other than the fact it's a sea creature and we live. It's a make-believe sea creature and we live next to the sea. So there is that, I guess. But no, there's no real correlation between that and Seattle. It started off almost like an online joke of sorts. Somebody said, let's call it the Kraken and release the Kraken. And it became like an internet gag. And I'd say half the city loved it and half the city hated it. And there was no in between. You either loved the idea or you hated the idea. And so it was a very polarizing thing. I think there are still people here that can't stand the name. But there are people here that love the name and that have embraced it. And I think the team's done a really good job of marketing itself and of merchandising itself, of selling merchandise. Everywhere you go around town now, I see people wearing Kraken gear. And for a team that's never actually played a game in anger, or they don't even have a player yet. They have one player, but they don't. It's very unusual to see that much merchandise being worn around town by a team that doesn't really exist yet. And so that's very encouraging. So I think they've done a good job with that. And I think as long as the team does okay on the ice, it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter what the name is.
So I have a question. Who was that one player that you said? You know his name?
Oh yeah. No. So what they have is something called they have it's a period where you can sign unsigned free agents right now. And so even though the Kraken don't have, they haven't drafted an NHL player, you can go and get junior players who are unsigned free agents. You can go and get overseas European that are unsigned free agents. Now, the Kraken has limited minor league spots, so they're being very selective, but they did go take a junior player from Quebec by the name of Luc Henman, and he played for Boisbriand Blainville the last 3 years. And originally he was drafted in 2018 by the Carolina Hurricanes. But then he was he's very slender at the time. He was about 6 feet, and he was about 150 pounds when he was drafted. He's actually a little taller than 6 feet, but he's I think he's 6'2", about 150 pounds. That's very slender, and he's had a hard time putting on muscle and growth. He's kind of a late bloomer that way. Now he's only 20 years old, so 21 years old, and so there is some time for him to develop physically. But Carolina's had some changes in priorities the last 3 years. They elected not to sign him. They drafted him, but he never signed, and so he became eligible to sign as a free agent now, and the Kraken went and signed him, and so they pay him minor league salary, and then if he makes the bigs, he'll get a big league salary. But that's their very first franchise player as of right now.
Oh, that's cool. So, like you said, the rink has been through many, renovations. So, how much was it again? One what? Billion?
That's the latest estimate. It's a little more than $1 billion. It's actually going to be, I think it's about $1 billion and 150,000 at this point. And then there's other stuff that they're going to put in around there. It just depends if you're looking at the arena itself or the arena and some of the surrounding stuff. The arena itself is, I think, $1 billion and just over $1 billion, $1 billion and 50,000 or something. And then it's like $1 billion and 0.2, close to $1 billion too, with all the signage and everything around the area. So it's a lot more than they originally thought, but a lot of that it's all private money, so it doesn't matter. They're not taking any of it from the public, which is good. It's a big change. If you live in Montreal, you know all about Olympic Stadium and what they went through over there. Of course, the Canadians built their own venue without tax money, but they got some big tax breaks in there as well. This was all privately funded. All the cost overruns are being funded privately. So the city here got a break, and they should. I've been inside. It looks like a really nice arena, so it should be really good.
Okay, so can you tell us about you've gone on a tour? Can you tell us about the rink? Is it not I'm guessing it's nice if it's over $1 billion, but can you tell us what did you see inside?
Well, it used to be called Key Arena, and so what they've done is they're technically renovating Key Arena, but it's not renovating. What they had to do is keep the roof, because the roof is over 50 years old, so it's historically protected. Designed by an architect for the World's Fair here in 1962, which was right before Montreal hosted the World's Fair in 1967. And so that was like a big deal. They built the arena just for that. So they kept the roof. They basically put the roof on stilts, destroyed everything underneath it, and then dug down way underground. I think they're about 52 feet underground, and they're digging out through the sides of the earth. And so they're building the entire arena basically underground to make it bigger, because it's in an area they expand the footprint too much. So they basically went underground and expanded it out that way. Then they built new walls and they reattached it to the old roof. And so it's a completely new arena underneath. That's why it cost $1 billion. Everything inside is going to be state of the art. It's going to be smaller than what you see nowadays. Nowadays, you see a lot of NHL rinks, 19, 20,000 seats. This one's going to be 17,000, a little more, 17,400 seats. It's going to be a very intimate feel to it, but everything is very steep. So I talked about the old Montreal Forum. What was great about that was it was really steeply built. All the seats were graded very steeply. So anywhere you sat, whether it was the first or the last seat in the house, was a great view of the ice. And it's going to be like that here. They went and they took the old schematics from the Montreal Forum, from Boston Gardens, from Maple Leaf Gardens, and they translated it over here, and they basically built an old style arena. And I've been to the worst seats in the house up there, and the sight lines are just really, really, really good to the ice. They're almost unobstructed completely to the ice, and it feels like you're a lot closer than you are.
Nice. And so Las Vegas did very well in their first year in the league. They had a great supplemental draft. Do you think the Kraken will take some chances on some big contracts to the to be contender right away?
Oh, I definitely do. The thing with the Kraken is, because of the NHL rules, they actually have to spend a lot of money to start. And so on the 30 players they're going to pick in the supplemental draft or the expansion draft, if you will, of those 30, they have to cost at least $48.9 million. They have to have salaries for next year at almost $49 million. That's the bare minimum. And if they don't reach that, they're in trouble because the league won't let them. They have to take on that much salary. Plus, there's also the salary cap minimum that they have to reach. Never mind those 30 players, but overall, their whole roster has to top at least $60 million next year. And they're starting from zero right now, don't forget, except for that one junior player they just signed. But that's minimal. You're talking under $1 million for that. So they will take some contracts, obviously, that are very good value economically. And that's what sports fans now are trained to look for teams to spend not a lot of money and get the biggest bang for the buck. So they'll be getting a lot of players like that, but they almost have to take on bad contracts of some players at this point, expensive contracts, in order to meet those minimal league rules as far as payroll goes. And it's tough when you're starting at zero. It's not always easy. You do the exercise on your computer. It's not always easy to hit 60 million. Most teams have, if they're lucky, 5-10 million a year in extra cap space to spend. These guys have 60 million minimum to spend, and they'll probably spend a lot closer to the maximum of 81.5 million. So yeah, they are going to go after some guys, some bigger guys. I would be very surprised if they don't. We've speculated about a few. I mean, there's Dougie Hamilton, a defenseman in Carolina, who's probably going to get about $8 million a year from whoever he signs with as a free agent. I mean, that's one guy. There's other people, in Edmonton, like Tyson Barrie, who would fit very well with this team here. I mean, we've speculated about them taking on some bad contracts like PK Subban over in New Jersey. I mean, if the Devils want to get out from under his contract, they could maybe try to put a proposal together for the Kraken to take his money on, or Brett Burns over in San Jose, who's owed a lot of money for many, many years to come. TJ Oshie with the Washington Capitals is from out here. He's from just north of Seattle. And, he's owed I think $5.5 million a year for the next 3 years. And so if you want to get out from under that, if you're the Capitals, this would be a normal place to want to ditch his contract. Same with Tyler Johnson of the Lightning. He's from Spokane, which is a few hours to the east of here in Washington. And he doesn't really fit with the Lightning anymore, but he's still a fairly young player. He's going to be 30 next year. And he's a centerman. There's all kinds of, he could be a versatile top 6 guy on this team. So it's possible they'll take on his contract money that's owed, which is about, I think it's $5 million for the next 3 years. So there's still, those are places where the Kraken could do deals to take on salary, get some decent players, and give other teams financial relief.
And I'm pretty sure you said this, but remind me again. How much does it cost to put a team in the league, like in the NHL?
Well, if you want, it depends. I mean, if you're talking about how much does it cost every year once your team exists, you have the salary cap maximum is 81.5 million, and the minimum floor is 60.2 million. So every year it's going to cost you at least $60 million to keep your team on the ice. Now, if you want to get a new team like the Kraken just did, the price tag for that was $650 million for the one-time fee. And that's why, I mean, Vegas, the price, I want to say $500 million they paid 4 years ago. So the price keeps going up. Yeah, it's a little crazy. Back in the day, not too long ago, even 20 years ago, the price, you're talking about under 100 million for a team. And so it's gone up. And because of that, that's why they make the draft rules so favorable now to these teams, because they're saying, okay, if you're going to pay us $650 million, we can't expect you to be in last place for 10 years, like the old expansion teams used to be back in the day.
So what are some names floating around right now for head coach? And who do you think would do well in that role?
Boy, that's a good question. Right now, every head coach who isn't tied down with a ball and chain to his current team is being rumored as a Kraken coach. The latest was Joel Quenneville of Florida. Joel Quenneville, the second all-time winningest coach in NHL history, and he's only in his second year there out of a 5-year deal. But the new rumor is that he really wants to come here because Ron Francis, the general manager, used to play with him in Hartford when they were both players with the Hartford Whalers. And so Ron Francis has played with half the coaches in the NHL. So every coach who comes up, like Rick Tocchet from Arizona. He's actually going to interview here for a job. He played with Ron Francis in Pittsburgh. Ulf Samuelsson played with Ron Francis in Pittsburgh, and now he's an assistant coach with Joel Quenneville in Florida. And so, yeah, we'll see. The Panthers are still playing right now as of today, and they haven't yet clarified Quenneville's status, but we'll see. They haven't denied that he's going to try to leave either. So we'll see what happens with that. The other one's Rob Brindamore in Carolina. They're still playing, of course, and his contract is going to expire once his team is eliminated, or if they win the Stanley Cup, whichever comes first. But he doesn't have a new contract yet, and they're saying they're going to extend him after the season, but it hasn't happened. Until it happens, the rumor is he's going to come here and coach with the Kraken, because he used to play with Ron Francis in Carolina. So Ron Francis played with everybody, so everybody's a candidate here. I think Gerard Gallant didn't play with Ron Francis, and he's coaching Canada over at the World Championships right now. He used to coach the Vegas team, so he's another name that comes up just because he coached the Vegas team. And I know the Kraken have had a lot of conversations with Vegas over the last few years about expansion and about all kinds of things related to what they went through. And so, even if Gallant doesn't interview here formally now, I think the Kraken have had a chance to talk to him in the past few years, maybe on the side. And I think they probably have gotten permission from Vegas to talk to him well before now to see if they'd really be interested or would like to move on. The fact that they're looking at all these other guys now and Gallant's still out there leads me to believe he won't sign here, but you never know. And I think you need a coach that commands respect. I don't think a new guy is going to do the job here. I don't think you can take a chance, roll the dice on a newcomer as a head coach. You have to get a veteran who's not afraid of the players, because the one thing expansion teams have in common is they're not all-star teams. Obviously, they're getting everybody else's leftovers, and so you need a team that's going to work hard, and that's going to that's going to outwork other teams every single night, or else you're going to lose a lot of games. And you, in order to do that, you can't go and get guys who have a reputation of being soft, and you can't get coaches that have maybe an inkling to be soft and are afraid of NHL players and don't know how to discipline them properly. So you need a veteran coach who knows how to motivate players, get the most out of them, and crack the whip when he has to, because this team is going to have to work hard. That's the bottom line.
So Carrie Price is from BC and played his junior hockey for Tri-City. Do you think he would have the Fleury effect? And would Seattle be willing to carry that contract, especially with him, playing so well?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. So, all season long, the assumption's been that the Kraken are going to draft Jake Allen, expansion draft, because Allen played almost the equivalent to Price for much of this year in Montreal, and statistically anyway, they were very similar players, and one doesn't cost nearly as much as the other guy, and the Canadians can't protect both. So the assumption is we're going to take Jake Allen. The funny thing is, you saw Jake Allen as a number one goalie in Montreal for the last month and a half with Carrie Price hurt, and if you watch, his numbers tended to go down. Not dramatically, but they started to consistently go down the more he played. And that's pretty common with backups. They get exposed. That's what we say. So, I mean, Allen's a very good backup, and he is what he is. Carrie Price is Carrie Price. You're seeing it in the playoffs now. He made probably what's going to be the best save of the entire playoffs the other night against Toronto. The Canadians still lost, but I mean, Carrie Price is playing like vintage Carrie Price right now. And he has that ability to do that. And so that's why the Kraken pays analytics staffers much more money than they pay me. They don't pay me anything. And the analytics staffers have to look, they have to crunch the numbers, they have to project what Price is going to look like going forward because of his age. He's in his mid-30s, he will be when he comes here. And I mean, it's huge. He's got a huge contract. That said, I've already told you, money isn't necessarily the determining factor here, because the Kraken have a lot of money to throw around. So if their analytics guys tell them that, yeah, he can pull a Marc-Andre Fleury and do the same thing, I wouldn't rule it out completely, but the Canadians would have to sweeten that deal big time. They can't just give them Carrie Price and think, oh, they're going to carry, whatever it is, $8 million a year on their salary cap hit $10 million a year. That's not going to happen for a guy that old. They're going to have to really sweeten the deal, throw in some other players, and maybe make it worth their while for that to happen. But I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, again, this is why they pay analytics guys, and I'm sure they're watching the playoffs right now, just like we are. And they're seeing Carrie Price when he looks like Carrie Price at his best. Would Carrie Price do better out here than in Montreal? I happen to think he might, because there's so much pressure in Montreal, as you know, and he's been anointed the savior there for the last, going on now almost for 15 years. And so, that's a heavy burden to take. And we've seen the toll it takes on some players from the Canadiens. So I think coming out here would definitely be a fresh start for him. The question is whether the Kraken would do it, as you've asked. And again, it depends on what their analytics guys tell them. And again, it also depends on whether he waives his no trade clause, his no movement clause with Montreal. I mean, we don't know that he'd do that automatically. I assume that he would, because his wife's from out here. His wife grew up out in Eastern Washington. So never rule anything out. I've learned that in sports. But right now, if I had to put money on it, I'd say they're taking Jake Allen. That's a long-winded answer. You can ask your dad. I know. I give a lot of. I'm long-winded sometimes.
Do you think the Kraken will draw some of the Northwest Canuck fans? And could this be the next big NHL rivalry?
Yeah, I think it'll definitely be a rivalry. It's not going to be the Montreal Canadiens, Quebec Nordiques. It's not going to be the Canadiens Maple Leafs rivalry, but it'll be a pretty good regional rivalry. Strictly because of the geography. Like the Canadiens Nordiques back in the 80s, you were separated literally by a 3-hour car ride, 2.5. Here it's more like a 3.5-hour car ride with a border thrown in, but it's still fairly close where you could actually drive down the day of the game and be back home in bed, by 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, which isn't terrible for a lot of people. So yeah, I think I could see that happening. I get asked if I think they're going to win over a lot of Canucks fans. No, I think there's a difference between whether you're born in the city as a fan, whether you grew up somewhere else and became a fan. So I think if you're from Washington here and have been a Canucks fan your whole life because you didn't have a team here, then I think, yeah, it's possible you might switch allegiances to become a Kraken fan. Now, if you're born in Vancouver and you're getting a little fed up with the Canucks because they haven't been to a cup in a decade and they never won a cup in their history, I don't think that's going to be enough to switch allegiances. I really don't. I think if you're a fan of a team because you're born and raised somewhere, you don't just switch because you move or because circumstances change. So I don't. When I lived in Toronto for almost a decade, I didn't suddenly become a Maple Leafs fan. I stayed a Montreal Canadiens fan, and if you watch the games in Toronto, you'll see half the building goes for the Canadiens when they play there. There's a reason, because all the Montrealers that moved there still have allegiances to their old team, and it's the same anywhere you go. I think that's the way sports are. New York Yankee fans that move to Boston aren't going to suddenly become Red Sox fans and stop cheering for the Yankees. That's just not how it works.
So we have one more question, then we're going to move on to rapid fire.
All right. I thought this was rapid fire. Man, I'm in trouble.
How are ticket sales going so far? And are you starting to see Kraken? So you said that you're seeing a lot of Seattle Kraken like merchandise and swag in the streets of Seattle. Is there and they haven't even played a game yet, and they only have one player. Why do you think they have so much merchandise on right now, even though that that they haven't even played a game yet? Like, do you think it's because they love the game, or why do you think they wear merchandise when there's nothing happening?
I ask myself that question all the time. Like, why would a grown man want to put on a uniform of a team that he's never played for before? And why would a grown man have a Guy Lafleur autographed shirt in the back of it hanging from his wall? If I figure that question out, it'll be the answer to the meaning of life, because I make my living off sports and I could not answer that question. I can guess and tell you that the Kraken is new, and people here in Seattle like trendy things. It's a very likes to consider itself sort of a hip kind of city that way, and that remains to be seen. It's all in the eye of the beholder. I think parts of Montreal think that it's a hip city as well. But yeah, they definitely are onto the latest trends here, the newest things, and this is definitely a new thing. There's a seen and be seen crowd that wants to look like they're part of the next best thing, which is good. I think that's good. I think the team's done a good job, as I said, of marketing itself. And so I think that part's exciting. I forget the first part of the question you asked.
It was how are the ticket sales going in the
sales have gone considering there's a pandemic on, it's unbelievable. They've sold almost all of their inventory as of now. They expect to sell it out by summer. And they're keeping some of it aside for single game sales and for community groups and stuff. But they had their targeted ticket base, and I think it was somewhere around 14,000, 15,000, 14,000. And that's gone well. People are actually fighting to get into the building. They've given some tours to some people, and there's people that want to get in and see.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
but only holders. Yeah, it's been fun. It's been cool. It's a cool arena.
All right, are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Great to ask what this is going to entail, but
All right, so what Kraken game are you most looking forward to?
Montreal when they play the Canadians.
What player out there would be a game changer for the Kraken?
Taylor Hall from the Boston Bruins. If they don't re-sign him, he's been on fire in these playoffs. Been the best player on the ice for Boston. And Brad Marchand. And I think if he becomes a free agent, Boston doesn't sign him, I think the Kraken should go all in on him and try to get him.
What was your favorite proposed team name?
My favorite was Sockeyes, but honestly, that was what I thought was nice and generic for everybody. But I don't think, honestly, I think Kraken is better. I was not a big Kraken fan, but it's grown on me. The name's grown on me. Sockeyes, I thought it was going to be the Sockeyes, but I was wrong. And I'm kind of glad I am. That it's kind of it's neither a here nor there name. It's kind of wishy-washy.
I remember I was on my PS4. We were, I think it was me and my friend Caleb Oki. We were creating a team, and it was the next Seattle team. And we were thinking of the name being the Seattle Sea Crabs. So we put a crab for the logo, and we put the Seattle Seahawks colors.
Yeah, I mean that we had a lot of names like that. A lot of sea mammals, sea urchins, sea everything. A lot of stuff indigenous to Washington, and everybody assumed it was going to be something like that. But yeah, no, they took a completely imaginary thing.
What will be your favorite NHL road trip?
My favorite NHL road trip. Are you there?
Yes.
Lost you for a second. Todd Lewicki from the Kraken was calling me. My favorite road trip would be Montreal, clearly.
Will the Kraken make the playoffs in their first year?
Yes, they will. They won't go to the Stanley Cup final, but I say they will make the playoffs.
And who will be the next Seattle team to win a championship?
Oh boy, the Sounders soccer team. That's an easy pick. They've gone to the final like 3 times in the last 5 years, and so and they've won twice. So that's going to be an easy pick. I don't think it'll be the Mariners. I think the Seahawks have run their course. I don't think the Kraken are going to be there for a while. It'll be the Sounders.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining my podcast. It was amazing to have you on. I was so excited. It was very fun. And yeah, thank you for joining.
Oh, it's great to be on with you. I enjoyed playing football with your dad back in the day, and he was a lot better at it than us. But our team, the one year we played in 1986, we were pretty good. So I like to think back on those days, and they weren't all in black and white. Some of them were actually in color those days. So it's not that long ago. All right.
Thank you so much for joining.
Take care.
Bye. Have a good day.